Probably yes.
Yep.
And we can have a discussion about where we go from here. Okay. Okay, any other comments? I see that we have a future council member here tonight. Welcome, Paul McCoy. Congratulations on your win.
Yes.
You blew us all out of the water. Yes.
Not that we're holding a grudge.
No.
No.
And Madam Mayor, I'd
And
like
also Kurt Condit
I'd
is
like to
here.
thank Kurt for having
Thank you,
us.
Kurt.
Thank you.
That's the democratic process in the mix,
Yes.
and hopefully,
Yes.
you had your first taste, and maybe you'll come back.
Yeah.
All right,
He just told me right before the meeting started, it's just the beginning.
all right.
So,
All right.
good attitude, good. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you both for being here. Okay, item number one, if there's no more comments from the public. Item number one, discussion possible action consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion or a member of the audience wishes to comment on an item. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent calendar items. A, approval ratification of payments issued from November 2nd through November 15th, 2018. And B, approval of minutes of the meeting held November 1st, 2018. What are the wishes of the council?
I'd like to make a motion to approve items 1A and B as they stand.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number two, discussion possible action, adopt resolution accepting deed from Jansen Davis LLC for donation of real property and authorizing execution of all documents relating to this transaction. I'm sorry that Dick Jansen isn't here.
Yeah.
We'd
Yeah.
like to thank him in person.
We should do that.
I think so.
So this is not the first time Mr. Jansen has donated property to the city for this purpose, but this is a half acre site right along the greenway, exactly where we would want a donation. And we're excited that he's willing to do this, and we would recommend approval, and we will, in addition to doing all the things you have to do with paperwork and so on, we'll be sure to send a thank you note to Mr. Jansen, or maybe at a future meeting as well. But
Maybe
we'll
a
see.
certificate of appreciation.
I'd like
or
to see
something.
all of us sign something that would go
Mhm.
towards.
Yeah,
it.
that would be
I really
nice.
would.
Yeah, because it's really a great thing to do
It
to
is.
advance this
It's huge
project.
for our community,
Mhm.
for somebody to be able to donate that to us and better our quality of life around here and not have any, recourse of want from the rest of us.
Mhm.
He's just giving it to us, so that's awesome.
Mhm.
So I'll
Okay.
make a motion that we approve, the adopt a resolution accepting the deed from Jansen Davis LLC for the donation of real property and authorizing execution of all documents relating to this transaction.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. And Dick, if you're watching on NorCal, thank you very much for your generosity. Okay, item number three, discussion, possible action. Authorize the city manager to contract with Archive Social for social media archiving services. And I think Gabe's here to talk about that. Come on up, Gabe. Does everybody know Gabe? Gabe is one of our newest workers. Welcome.
I've
You've
taught golf at
contracted,
one point, and
right?
I've worked at Acme for almost 4 years, and helped pretty much all of you out one time or another. But
And we lucked out, we've got you now.
yeah, I'm here. I'm enjoying it so
Welcome.
far. Social media communications. City of Yreka is required under law, under the California Public Records Act, to make all social media website communications records publicly available to any persons who filed a Freedom of Information Act request. This requirement includes all social media posts, messages, and items submitted to social media sites by representatives of the city of Yreka. Replies made by the public in response to official posts on any active social media site run by the city and its employees when working in an official manner are also be included. So there's nothing in place in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that to allow us to have access to these records. With the exception of like going back and like just sorting through everything and trying to find something. So Archive Social has a program in place where they grab the post's history as it's happening in real time. So they catch the edits that are made to a post, they catch things being deleted, things being hidden. So say someone says something really inflammatory, right? Says something really bad on our page. And then we remove it, or people get mad at them, and then they edit it, make it look like everybody's just jumping on them, for no reason. Well, they could say, oh, well, the city had no reason to pull it down. Look at my post. There wasn't anything wrong with it. It was fine. Well, with this, we can go back and say, no, here's what you posted. And this was wrong. Now, there are several examples of cities and municipalities being sued by people for failure to comply with records requests involving social media. So it is a real concern for the city that this could happen at some point. Just with the prevalence of social media, you have all the things with the animal control. You know, you go on there every once in a while, you see a dog that's on there, dog is injured, people just start going off about all kinds of stuff, about how the dog looks, how they think it's being treated by animal control, all these different things. And without having some sort of record system in place to catch all of those comments, it's unfortunately just a matter of time until something happens.
Thank you. Any questions? I think that it sounds like it's a good idea to cover us legally. It could probably save us a lot of money in the long run if we were able to archive. Is that what it does? It archives the
It
information?
archives and creates a searchable index of everything with tags and notes and the whole, all of that saved with even showing who made the edit, when they did it at the time, all that saved in their system.
No, I think it's a good thing on both ends of it, not just our end.
Is your hand up or are you
No,
waving
no,
at me?
I'm listening.
Oh,
Go-
okay.
I'll be next.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel it's, it's a good, for both ends of it, not only protect the city, but also, to have things archived to where there is a reference for the citizens to show what they've stated, so it works both ways on that.
No, it's a great idea. My only question was, did Don review the service agreement?
No, I don't think so, right?
Yeah,
So I would like him to review it before we approve it.
I agree.
Okay, then have a review and then put it on the next agenda?
Well, or we could do a preliminary, if he approves it,
Yes.
then we
Yes,
authorize the
please.
city manager to go ahead with it. And so
Is
that
that a
way we're not
motion?
holding it up, but I'd like someone,
I agree.
I'm not,
You take that.
this isn't my normal.
No, but we can blame you when you
It's not your
Yeah,
bailiwick?
exactly.
Not your
Blame the
bailiwick?
guy going out.
Yeah.
So is that a motion?
Yes, well, the motion would read as follows. The motion would be that we authorize the city manager to contract with Archive Social for social media archiving services, provided that the city attorney has read and approved the language in the contract.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So Steve, I'll let you talk to Don about that.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you very much, Gabe, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 4, discussion, August 2018 CalPERS actuarial reports. Retta, I think this is you.
It is.
Mhm.
I bring you tidings. Maybe
Uh-oh.
not of joy.
I hope it's
No.
good.
No,
I hope it's
But
good.
Not good.
I feel
Yeah.
obliged to make sure when these reports come out that we take a little look at them and, kind of look at our position, kind of individually outside of, the audited financials, because it kind of sometimes gets lost in those and doesn't have that forecasting that the actuarial reports do. But, for those in the audience, CalPERS is, the pension, that does, provides, the city is a member of CalPERS that provides our pension. And, there's been some changes in how,
Retta, can I stop you for a second? Not everybody knows what PERS stands for. It's Public Employees
retirement system.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll try to keep this really brief, but I did want to spend a few minutes at least kind of doing a little background. Because you hear a lot about it and what does this mean? So, I'm gonna try to do the short version, but, actuarials, just like insurance and your mortality, and, you know, they try to determine life insurance based on, actuarial valuations of things. So does CalPERS try to determine, what it's going to, cost the city for its active, retired, and separated employees, which we have a contractual obligation to, provide retirement, or pension earnings for. And CalPERS has really looked, over the years at, gains and losses, and certainly during the downturn, of how, it models, the valuation of what the city's liability is. And what's happening is, with the low rates, they've dropped the expected rate of return on their investments. No surprise there. But they really lagged on that because market rates have been down for a while, and they're just now kind of dropping down their discount rate. And from, I think it was even a year and a, I'm gonna get my dates wrong, but at one time it's 7.5, now we're 7.25, we're going down to 7. They looked at mortality, and people are living longer. So what their actuarial mortality rates were too low than what their experience rates were. So they've had to adjust for that. They used to, other thing was the amortization of gains and losses. They're shortening the period of that amortization of gains and losses, in which you can realize that. Some of you have gains and losses on tax return, or you can speak to that, and there's kind of like an allowable period on that. Well, CalPERS kind of like let it go out to 30 years, and now they're ratcheting it back to realize those. And the other big thing on the pension, and these are the plans mostly that were in place pre-pension reform, and there's, if I say the word PEPRA, it's when in 2013 the state of California had an act that reformed the pension plan for new hires, and what their pension benefits would be for those hired prior to January 1, 2013. And so there's kind of 2 tiers of benefits, and what we're looking at, what we refer to as the classic, are those older plans where employees had a vested interest in these contracts that the city entered into, and that the employees are participants in. So with the long story short, now I've kind of rambled, is here's the sticker shock. We will be paying in unfunded liabilities by 24-25 an expected $894,000. And I can tell you that number is undervalued because there's been subsequent events since the reports were issued that are gonna make that number even higher. So that number, what they did is they said, we published a report, but since we did these valuations, there's also some subsequent events that'll make this a little higher. So I'm gonna kind of go out on a limb and say by 24-25 on our unfunded liability, we'll be at about $1 million of outgo. That does not include the percentage that we pay on just the regular
The normal retirement.
normal
Yeah.
contributions, safety norm, and that's shared between the employee and the employer. So a couple of things can make this go better. Interest rates could go up, returns on PERS, the market could heat up, and, PERS get a greater than expected discount rate in earnings. People could not have the expected mortality that they've run it out to be, but realistically, this is now a closed-in pension fund, meaning there are no new members that can join it. Now, the city can have employees that are hired that are in the classic plan, so we could grow our liability that way if we have people who are hired that are already in the classic plan, because we kind of pick them up in that plan group. They can also separate. So, but for the most part, you can think of it kind of now as a finite pension plan. It's kind of like, shouldn't be growing other than changeover in staffing if we bring somebody in that's already a classic member and recognize those benefits. So without going into, if you kind of read the staff report, I tried to kind of highlight some of the the more exciting points. And the picture plans are underfunded. That's why CalPERS is trying to do the right thing and catch them up. The right thing for CalPERS, it's really, I think, gonna be a burden on cities. And, I think, those of you active in the league, I think you're gonna be hearing a lot of creative ideas of how cities are going to manage this on their horizon.
We've been hearing about it and getting updates all along,
Right.
but nobody seems to have a solution.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
good
And so
news.
that's my question to you, is that how do we cover this additional $1 million?
Well, I think, I think that that's going to be probably, could be a policy focus on how do we wanna start addressing that. You can look at, do you want, a redirection of revenues? Will there be any additional revenues? That kind of thing. Do you want to, start setting aside in addition right now before they ratchet up to that, on that? So I guess kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, on part of this is we started, I don't know if you recall some of our, other OPEB or other pension employee benefits, or which is like, and it's a de minimis share of the city's contribution of health care for annuitants. We are actually funding that up pretty good. And I think in about 2 or 3 years, we'll be at a funding level that we might be able to back off on contributions on that and perhaps redirect that to help meet, kind of taking away from one to pay the other. But if you get to a reasonable funding level, it might be, the nice thing with the OPEB when you self-fund is that it gives you a little bit of discretion in it, what level you fund at. With the CalPERS on the unfunded, we'll have to meet the contractual obligations. I don't know, kind of CalPERS might be looking at this as an organization. I'm not quite sure how everybody's addressing it. Citywide, some agencies are in a better position. I think we're right in the mid-range. We're probably average to a little better than average because we didn't go down we don't have a 2005 mega pulling unfunded liability. We didn't get to that. We took care of that.
Good.
We didn't go on public safety at the time to 3% at 50. I think Dave can remember those days when we had to hold the line on that. So I think we're a little better than some of the other cities. And Steve and I have kind of been talking back and forth on, kind of what is a real number on this, kind of with some of the actuarials for that, because there could be some concern that it might be slightly undervalued even at this. But
Meaning that they will have another adjustment, which would be even more money to us perhaps?
perhaps
That's lovely,
on that. So I just kind of want to put that out there. That is a horizon issue for us as a city, and to kind of plan for that. Now, when I say that, remember now we're already contributing $430,000, so you're not looking from 0 to 900,000. You're looking from the current level to that, and I think again we'll have a little discretion possibly in looking at the contributions to our health insurance for retirees, and might be ratcheting that back because that's self-funded. We trying to meet the actuarial objective, but if it's that tight, you might have some discretion in doing that. And that's really a policy issue.
There are options.
Well, as with every budget, there's options and discretion, but it's gonna be tight.
Okay, thank you.
Is it
Okay.
legal?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I looked at the numbers here, and currently you're paying 430,000 plus, and next year it's gonna go up to 607,507. That's over 176,000 increase just next year.
In 1 year.
And that's 1 year, and then it keeps going up
Yes,
year
sir.
after year.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's gonna put the screws on us doing anything new, because we're gonna have to save money to cover that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have to lay off people.
Yeah.
So it's gonna make the situation tight, because we also have the storm drain issue, the MS-64, that's a very huge unfunded mandate by the state,
Yep,
Well,
so.
that's true. They just
We
keep
hope
coming
that-
at us.
Yep.
yeah, we can only hope that, there'll be some given out, that perhaps there'll be a, majority protest formation possibly of a special, of a, enterprise fund in
For
the
the
future.
storm drain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we hope.
yeah, so,
Any other good news?
no, but I did wanna bring up, because I just kind of like, just in the background, you know, the kind of, as I hear it and I kind of worry about things, you kind of know where I'm coming from sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
bringing this up before it hits us in the face.
Well, it's
That's
kind of
awesome.
here, yeah.
Is
Rob.
it legal to offer buyouts?
I know.
Yeah,
no,
I-
seriously.
no, that's a
Seriously,
good-
yeah.
Yeah,
You mean to have people go out on early retirement?
No.
No,
Actually,
well,
we can
these are
pay in
people that are
advance.
on a pension plan also
Right.
that we're funding, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
yes.
Is it illegal to offer them a buyout?
I believe it's their option. I
But,
mean,
so that's
they're-
an option.
So it is an option.
So, for the employees,
Yes,
yeah, but,
most won't.
Does that save you any money? I mean, you're
well,
not.
that would be.
Because this is based on a mortality rate according to actuary tables, and
It-
you're saying, you know what? If you wanna wait 30 years or whatever, here's this amount this is how much money, we're offering you this much money now if you wanna take it, and you forego that.
No, it doesn't work that way.
CalPERS has
Yeah.
a formula
Right.
that you get so much if you decide to back out of the system.
Correct, and it's nowhere,
Yeah.
if you've been in the system for very long, it doesn't really make very much sense. You know, if you've been in it just, say, 10 years and you're 32, then maybe. So the buyout that you're talking about, I don't think would work the way that you're thinking of. What I was referring to is there used to be what were called golden handshakes, where you'd have someone retire
Early retirement.
early, but the main cost savings on that was not a savings in retirement. In fact, you could argue because of the longevity that maybe there wasn't a savings in retirement, but it was to bring on new employees that didn't cost you as much for the first 5 years or so of their employment. I would suggest to you that probably this isn't a good time to do that, because we're having difficulty finding qualified employees in some of our positions right now, and certainly statewide and nationwide.
We're not the
there's-
only ones, right?
Yeah, we're not the only ones at all, so, I don't know the answer to a golden handshake if it saves money on pension. I thought it would break even, but I could be dead wrong about that,
I don't know.
yeah.
So I-
Maybe we could
Throw
look at
something
it.
out
An
there.
option.
Something to look
The,
at.
one of the other things that CalPERS in its, the way that it works is it has a termination plan. So if today we decided that CalPERS was not something that we wanted to offer anymore, then the city could buy out, you know, we'd have to negotiate with the employees and all kinds of things there. The thing though is that they use a very low interest rate for the assumption on what it is. So instead of having tens of millions of dollars that we owe going forward, it can turn into very much higher figures. And I think they actually gave that to us in the actuarial plan. And to my knowledge, no city has done that yet. There's a city that has stopped, that I'm aware of, that has stopped paying the CalPERS payments, and I don't know how that's gonna turn out. And then there are some very small districts that have looked at it. But there have been some very tiny, in terms of staff, cities that have looked at it and said, this doesn't make sense. There might be one city that had a couple of employees that may have done it, but it just doesn't, it seems intuitively like, well, maybe that would be a good idea. It probably, it's cost prohibitive for us to do it.
I actually asked that question at a League of California Cities meeting, our division meeting, where there was a presentation by PERS about, there were a lot of cities there, especially smaller cities, that said, what if we go broke? What if we cannot afford to pay this additional money? And PERS said, well, you know, we don't like to think that that's gonna happen, but if it does, here's what happens. Your retirees will receive the percentage of their retirement income to which you've paid into.
Correct.
In other words, they will receive less money because the city is not paying in.
Right, and that's exactly what happened with, the city I was speaking of is Loyalton, happens to be part of our insurance pool. It's not a compensable liability for us, but as an insurance pool, but that is exactly what happened.
Wow.
The city is trying to pay those employees with current revenues to make them whole. There's no way that you can know whether that's sustainable or not.
Wow.
So,
So-
and the laws may change on that. There are some Supreme Court cases that may allow cities prospectively to change the retirement system, depending on court case, but so far that has not been the case.
So what about, okay, we have, we're paying into this.
Yeah.
Obviously, previous employees, future employees, we're paying into this also.
But they're in a, future employees, unless they
In a
are already in
different
the system in
pool.
a different city, are
Right.
in a different pool that
Right.
Right.
is, what, it's, the unfunded liability is a tiny amount, right? It's in
Yeah.
the
Smaller.
hundreds of dollars or something. It's-
Right, you can,
Yeah.
on page one, it's like $7,000 right now for us.
Right.
And
So-
if you look on, so it's really the classic plans, and then if you look on the kind of the, taking that a little further, on the back page, it's one of my favorite charts. But to explain that a little bit, is you can see that your liability has already been incurred. It's really with the annuitants right now where you're underfunded on
Right.
liability.
The people already
They're already
receiving it.
separated.
Mhm.
So, it's kind of like debt you incurred without any debt service plan, in a way. So, it is, it's too bad.
Mhm.
So as long as they're working, we don't have to start paying this out, correct?
Well, we're still
Um,
paying into it.
You
Yeah,
pay into it,
Into PERS.
to PERS,
Right.
right,
So
so,
it won't do any good to ask Liz and Steve to work till they're 80, 90.
actually, they aren't, they would be
Longer
foregoing the benefits and continuing to contribute, so,
Yeah.
yeah, it would probably help the plan.
Which
Um,
one?
Convince
And
me?
you
I
as
don't think
well,
so.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the dilemma is that basically, and PERS wasn't necessarily, the boom of the 2000s and things like that wasn't really our friend in foreseeing kind of the downturn in the economy and these kind of, and then all the other changes that they were doing. And basically, this liability was growing without any measured action to kind of like stem the tide. And then, then CalPERS got, especially when it became a closed-in pension fund, meaning there's no new members that can come into it. Now, if you're a classic, you can go between other agencies, but really nobody new is enrolling in it. So it's now a closed-in fund. And so now they're really being able to value it. They know what they've got. We aren't using new employees to cash
fund
flow
the
this
old
out.
ones, yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Which is probably why the $1 million, right? That's why we've got an additional $1
Half
million,
a million.
because no one's paying in.
I'm not sure I
I
understand the
think that,
question.
I think that actually, when you're looking at why is there an unfunded liability, is I think the question you're asking. And Retta can correct me, but there's a whole bunch of different factors that she mentioned. One of them is that we're living longer. Yay. But that costs more.
Right.
The second is that CalPERS has not achieved the rate that they've achieved in the past
Right.
on the money and does not expect to do so going forward. In other words, they're now being more conservative. There are people that argue they're not being conservative enough, but at least they're being more conservative. But that costs us every time that they do that.
Right.
And I can't remember the other thing that's happened. It's a return, discount rate, and age. Is there a fourth one?
Amortization of gains and losses has been shortened,
Right,
and the fact
Oh,
that
that's
now
true,
it's a
yeah.
closed-in fund,
right.
on it, so all those things.
Well,
Well, it's also decisions that different cities and agencies made on their retirement system. Certainly, they have different provisions in different cities, and
Right.
if the
Right.
retirements were more generous, boom, there's lots more unfunded liabilities.
But as Retta mentioned, this city did not take that tact.
Thank goodness.
So we didn't have the 3% at 50 balloon that a lot of cities, including some that I've worked for, have going on. So that is in our favor.
Yeah.
But that, you know, there's still an unfunded liability in spite of that, it's just smaller.
Is there any benefit in the future for us as a city to, I mean, it's not gonna solve the problem at hand, but to do more subcontracting out of employees? Would that help us out in financially as a city?
I can't really, I think you're going to start transitioning with the PEPRA, which is, funded, that's what the pension reform was about. So those pension plans, all new hires are going in those, and those are being managed at this time properly. So I think it's not gonna change your core problem because it's there.
It's already in the past is what
Yeah,
the bigger
so
problem is.
you contract it out or, have turnover and do it through new hires. They're most likely, going to be in the new pension system unless, you're hiring, experienced personnel that are already, in a classic plan, and then we are bringing them in. So those transfers do carry a cost.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, Norm.
Well, the other problem is we've had a bull market for 10 years now
Yeah.
with excellent investment returns, and it's gonna turn and go the other way in a couple of years, and that's gonna make it even more difficult for CalPERS to get a high enough return, so we may be hit with even more liability.
Yeah, that's scary. That's scary. That's, people don't realize too, it's not just California. PERS is all over. Oregon's going through the same
Public
problems. I talked to
employees.
some officials up in Oregon, and they're battling the same problem that we're battling, so it's all over.
There are some very bad states, if you wanna look
Yeah.
at those.
Yeah.
But it's not, what is that, cold comfort?
Mhm.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, exactly.
I will say, I have seen some case studies where, cities really tackled this head on and explained the problem, and certainly with public safety and the public, I know some fire districts have been able to successfully, make their case and fund debt service or funding for that pension debt. So, I think you'll see more case studies coming out of that, of successful funding, of how strategically they may do it. CalPERS has compressed us to 20-year timeline, and that's pretty tight for us to pick up this debt. So, again, there's gonna be a lot of probably innovation coming out in the next 3 years as cities work their way through this, because, it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma.
Huge.
Okay, now that we're all depressed.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you for bringing us up to date,
Yes,
though. Really
thank you, Red,
appreciate
for all
that.
your time.
Okay, so that's the last item on the agenda, except for city manager and staff reports.
I wanted to bring up a couple of things, maybe we already talked about this, but the, burn permits, we had last week, we were saying, hey, you can start, burning. We've since reversed course, partially due to weather that didn't come, and recognizing, that there's a lot of fire resources already committed to other places in the state, and so that'll be until further notice. And just looking at the weather, it'll probably be another couple weeks, just because the forecast is a little cold, but not much in the way of moisture. But I'm not the guy that decides that. And the county is also in the same boat. One of the things that people may have is you may have noticed that the leaves are dropping. And so sometimes that's what people like to burn, because that's what the burning is for. I wanted to mention that there is leaf collection going on at the Yreka Community Gardens on Knapp Street this weekend between 10 and 1, and then also December 1st between 10 and 1. So that is an option for people. I haven't done that in a few years, but I remember the last time I went there, they're incredibly grateful. I'm thinking, I'm bringing you my leaves, and you're thanking me. That was actually very wonderful. So, went to a courthouse meeting on, are you gonna bring up the courthouse? You want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Went to a courthouse meeting on, I think it was last Friday. Seems like only yesterday. They are planning to do a start in December, kind of low-key. They're trying to make sure that the start happens under the current fire marshal guidelines. There's not a delay redoing the plans, and that's a really good decision. They will probably be starting up heavy in either late January or early February. That's their current thing, and then the project is scheduled to be done in, this is Steve speak, winter of 2020. So they have a date, and they're
That's
willing.
when they'll start?
No, that's when they'll finish.
Ah,
Yeah. So, anyway, as you may recall, part of Fourth Street's going to be closed down in there. There will be less parking because of the contractors, the main contractor and other contractors using some of the existing parking lots. So we're gonna be getting together, the chief and I, which is what I called you about, remember? Yeah. We were trying to figure out what we were gonna talk about, and we didn't talk about it today. Anyway, yeah, so that we can work out some parking arrangements, because it will impact the entire downtown for a while.
wow.
And in some ways, it will may be good for downtown, particularly if you are a restaurant that appeals to guys with hard hats. So, just saying, there's a business opportunity there. So, any questions? I'd be happy to answer, but,
Question on
Yes.
the leaf collection.
yes.
Are they running the street sweepers around trying to pick up leaves around in the streets? Because I've seen quite a number of leaves in the streets too lately.
The last time I checked, and I have not been updated this week, but the last time that I checked, our street sweeper was down.
Well,
It's, our street sweeper is aging, and it is one of the things that we're constantly looking at, you know, do we repair
Replace
it? Do we replace it? It's an expensive piece of machinery, but right now, or at least last week, it was definitely down. And the one good thing about not having a bunch of rain is it's not clogging all the drains right now. I don't have an ET, it might be back for all I know, but I haven't seen it run down the street. So, we are encouraging people to bag their leaves. I've seen a couple of, actually, I went out and thanked one of the landscapers. You know, some landscapers like to blow the leaves into the street. We don't want them to do that. So there was a landscaper while I was walking through his parking lot, and so I thanked him for blowing all the leaves into a big pile and putting it in bags and putting it in the back of his truck, because he was doing the right thing. And you don't often see landscapers smile, because they're working their tail off.
Especially
But
this time of year.
I think he really appreciated it. I don't know, maybe no one ever
And they're
tells him.
doing a collection,
What?
the garden, no, the community garden
Yeah.
is collecting every Saturday. It was last Saturday, this Saturday, and I think the next
I think you
Saturday.
said-
It's this weekend and December 1st, of the next
Yeah.
two. I do have
Yeah,
a flyer if anybody's interested.
Is that something, do you
That's
know
a
if they're
good thing.
putting that out publicly?
What's that?
Do you know if they put it out in the newspaper or publicly?
Um,
By any chance, do you know?
I know that they sent out these. We have it posted at City Hall. I haven't seen it in the newspaper personally, but that doesn't mean anything
Right.
based on my newspaper readership. So, and I mean that in the nicest
That's
possible way, it's just I
social
don't always see the announcements in there. So, in the past, sometimes if we've had this early enough, we try to put it in our water bills.
Yeah.
But, I think that they're working with their volunteers, you know, like to schedule it closer to the time when they're doing it, so we usually don't have the lead time to do that. So I don't know how much it's been publicized, but.
And then back to the street sweeping and stuff, is there
Yeah.
anything that we could publicly send out to people, especially to some of the landscapers and stuff, to encourage them not to blow it out into the streets? I mean, is there could we, you know, hey, would be really thankful if you didn't, we're having struggles with our street sweeper.
You know what, I remember seeing that and I think it was in the water bill recently.
Oh, really?
We do ask
I
people
thought
not to
there was-
send it
yeah,
in
there
the
was
street.
yeah, there was something just like that, it said, don't put it out in the street.
Right,
Same way with snow.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so we're doing that with the general public for sure. And most professional landscapers do exactly that because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So, it really is. And we appreciate it, you know,
I don't know about the street sweeper.
they're professionals,
yeah,
so.
the street sweeper, it's
Yeah,
too
it's a
bad.
bummer.
Too bad it's broke down. I saw it, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
going down the street. It's doing a good job then.
Yeah, and like I say, it might be back, but I haven't seen it. Some of those big pieces of equipment, when they're down, you really notice them.
Mhm.
And,
This time of year, yeah.
and they're usually things where you know, we repair the small things, but when it gets to the big stuff, then you've gotta send it to the people that specialize in that.
And we just have one mechanic, right? Tim
Actually,
Shaw?
Actually, we have two right now.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, there's a gentleman named, is it Matt Bowles?
Yes.
So do they work on it or they send it out?
It depends on what the, what
Problem
it is.
Yeah.
They, I mean, if you asked him to describe the different repairs that he's done on the street sweeper, the vac truck, and some of the other large equipment, including some fire trucks, because he's qualified to work on them, he has some pretty good stories about
bet.
what you have to do. But there is a point where it makes sense to go to the where it's basically a large industrial mechanic that has all that equipment and can do all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, there's some interesting stories. Hang out with Tim for an hour sometime. He will,
He's very
yeah,
knowledgeable.
exactly, and he's done it, I mean, he's done a great job for us. I think he feels really good about our new mechanic as
Good.
well.
Good.
But we try to
Finally
balance,
getting them some help.
sometimes we contract out, we try to minimize that to the extent that we can, but there's a certain point where either we don't have the staffing to be able to do it, because some of these things take forever,
Or the
or
equipment.
the equipment that's required is a specialized part, or
Right.
needs
Especially with
specialized
that, yeah.
machinery to do whatever it's.
Especially the street sweeper, it was broke down, last year, it was broke down for a number of months because of the part availability,
Yeah,
if I remember right.
Because it's old.
it's sort of
Well,
like.
and it's not, that's a specialty thing, it's not like you go to, you know, the local CarQuest store and buy
Yeah.
a part for something of that magnitude, it just
Right.
doesn't happen, so.
We're hoping it's not like copy machines where, you know, the more urgent the job, the more likely it is to fail.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
no kidding.
Anyway,
Murphy's Law, okay.
Mhm.
Is that your report?
yes,
We were happy to help you with your report.
thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Okay, so,
Make it longer.
so
sound
Dwayne,
better.
Councilmember Keg, do you have a report?
Couple things,
Okay.
in conjunction to the fire hazard that we were talking about, that I don't know if people read in the newspaper, there was actually something about fire hazard and how that works in conjunction, that why we are such a high risk of fire danger this day and age. For basically every degree of temperature that we go up, there has to be X amount of precipitation to offset that. And we right now are running on an average of 5 degrees higher temperature than our average is. So if you calculate that 5 degrees of higher temperature in conjunction to no moisture precipitation whatsoever, that's why our fire hazard has risen so high, and that's why statewide it's such a huge thing too, is because we're going over two different things. The amount of temperatures rise so much in conjunction with the amount of precipitation that we have not received. So that was, to me, that was very educational when I read that in the newspaper. I do like reading the newspaper, and.
Me too. I just don't always see
And
it.
there's a lot of educational things
Right.
that come about that, and that was one of the things that it made sense. I look at that going, okay, that's not just, oh, we're not addressing the forests and managing them properly. No, that is one issue, yeah. But when it comes down to whole cities burning up, that wouldn't have no bearing on forest management there. What it has a bearing on is our temperature has risen and we have not had any precipitation to counteract that. So
It's
that was-
partial, the thickness of the trees.
Oh, yeah,
and-
most definitely.
But plus the dryness and the lack of humidity, it all contributes, and
Yep.
then if you add wind
Yep.
to the spark, that's.
Yeah, just like what Rob was saying,
Yeah.
was thank goodness we
We didn't have wind.
any wind that day up there,
Would've
because it
been gone.
would have been a different
Yep.
outcome, you
Yep.
know, so that's that. So I just wanna throw that in there, there was something that made sense for why such things are in high fire danger now. Secondly, we had our Siskiyou Homelessness Coalition meeting today. It was, went very well. We talked about the point in time count, which will be in January, and I know I talk about this a lot, but I think it's has a huge impact on our future of how to address the homelessness situation. Sheriff Lopi made it today, and it's always a pleasure having Sheriff Lopi there. He contributes a lot to the situation and really wants to help out the situation entirely. After the fact, I did go to the Highway Patrol office, and we are gonna receive their help this year too in the point in time count.
Good,
So
good.
that was a huge thing too, because they can they can contribute something on finding numbers of transients or people homeless that are passing through that here that we can't deal with, because we just mainly address the ones that live here or stay here. They address the ones that are passing through, so that'll be a huge contribution to the point in time count also. So I think we made some good progress. We're gonna see some different numbers this year on our point in time count that'll hopefully result to some better funding and for the future. That's basically all I got. for this.
Possibly the Forest Service too.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, the Forest Service is
help.
definitely, yeah,
The
we're
ones
definitely
out
gonna
in
get
the
them
forest.
involved for sure this year. Oh, and secondly, there is, add to it, the homeless shelter is up and running. It is, just so people know, because it needs to be public knowledge, it is at the Greenhorn Grange, approximately 6 days a week right now. It's not on Mondays, and some
Tuesday.
Saturdays it's not being used also. The churches are hopefully gonna pick up that, lapse time between there on those days, but it is up and running. They had, what did John say last night, or say 3 to 4 people last night, I think they had.
They just haven't heard about it yet.
Yeah, so, you know, it's one of those things, it's however you view it, it is something to offer the people that hopefully truly need it, and it'll hopefully be, you know, an advancement in the right direction on that aspect, so. That's it.
That's it? Okay, thank you. Supervisor, I just elected you again. Councilmember Pacheco. Pretty soon I'll be calling you judge, I don't know.
So, attended a special meeting, and also I was on a couple of committee meetings, and that's pretty much my report.
Thank you.
Well,
I will call you councilmember. Councilmember Shasky.
Okay, there's a request that the council follow up with a letter opposing the rate increase for Pacific Corps. And it's based upon recommendations from the Public Advocate's Office of the California Public Utilities Commission. They did a whole report, and they recommend that the rate of return on equity, that's the stocks of Pacific Power, they get a rate of return of 8.94% compared to Pacific Corps' request of 10.6%. That's 1.66% increase in the equity return over what the Office of Public Advocate's Office recommends. And that is at almost exactly the rate increase of 1.9%. So I mean, I think the city should send a letter opposing that rate increase based upon the results of this Public Advocate's Office study. Because they did a whole bunch of things in there, and I went through it, and it seems rather valid. I mean, to me, Pacific Corps is just trying to get more money for their stockholders by upping the rate. So I think it would be wise if the city would send a letter. If there's support from the council, the mayor could draft the letter and send it.
Okay.
Something to look
Put
at.
it
I
on the
don't know if
next
it's something we
agenda.
need to have the attorney look at first, but maybe,
Right.
but. No.
Before we suggest that we have the attorney look at it, I wanted to point out the office, I can't remember, Office of Ratepayer Advocate, I think they just
Right.
changed their name, but.
Right.
They agreed with.
Public Advocate's Office.
They
right.
agreed with most of the factors that go into the rate study that Pacific Power did. They had slightly different timing on some of the rates because Pacific Power based theirs in early spring, and they were looking at August. So the one thing that they were different was the rate of return on equity, as you pointed out. And a lot of that seems to be driven by Pacific Power saying that one of their biggest threats is consumer choice aggregation, which is where instead of buying your power through Pacific Power, you pay somebody else. You know, a lot of times this happens on green energy. I have been approached by another city to see if we're interested. I said, well, we save money because Pacific Power is pretty, and he said, yeah, that's probably not why people do it. They do it more for green power. So one of the questions that I have is in terms of trying to prepare, you know, I usually like to do staff reports where I compare things, back and forth, we do that. The league sends something down and says you should oppose this bill, I make sure I read the bill. In this particular case, I'm wondering how much time you would want us to look into what the impact is of that change in the rate of return on equity in terms of the rate increase, because I really can't tell, whether it's, I don't know how.
Reasonable or not.
I don't,
you know?
well, right, I have no idea if it's reasonable, that's why there's an administrative judge, the PUC specializes in that.
Right.
And I don't know if it's, the whole rate increase because of the change in the return on equity, which could make sense, or if it's a very small fraction of that in the way that the formula, I just have no idea. So, I guess I'm kinda looking for a little guidance, if you're gonna write a letter on that, it seems like you could say, hey, we don't expect community choice aggregation to happen here. Therefore, if Pacific Power is basing their request for a higher return on equity of that, they probably shouldn't get that.
Well, it says in the report that community choice aggregation, that it would be at least 2 years before it would even happen. If
Correct.
some city started to do it immediately.
Right, yeah, there's a long process in there, so that's why the Office of Ratepayer Advocate is saying, hey, they shouldn't get to use that higher rate. So I just don't know how far you wanna go. I mean, I would feel comfortable saying, it appears, blah, 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 and that has to do with the CCA, and to the extent that that is a factor in the rate increase, it probably shouldn't be.
Right.
Something like that would make sense, but I'm not sure that that's what you're asking for, Councilman.
Well, I think the return on equity is higher than the ratepayer advocates thinks it should be. And I think that's important
Okay.
because it affects everybody in our communities. That's why I think it would be important to at least send a letter stating that we oppose it
Right.
based upon 2 things. The community choice aggregation, which we don't think is gonna happen or in any large amount in the whole service area of Pacific Power. And number 2, that the return on equity is a little too high based upon this study. So those are the 2 issues I think would be stated in the letter.
Okay.
So, actually, Steve and I were talking about that this afternoon, and we've been talking about it since the meeting that I attended in Weed, and so, we are looking into that. So, if we could draft something and put it on the next council meeting.
Yeah, if that's, I don't know if that's timely or not, but sure, that might make more sense.
Okay.
We'll do a draft.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, great. Mayor Pro Tem Bayard,
Alrighty.
she's got a list.
4 things. Don't fall asleep on me. Okay, so, myself and Norm were able to do the walkthrough of the new police station this
Oh.
last week. Very, I was surprised she didn't say anything. I get to
Yeah,
shine.
cause you told me it was really, you told me it was nice.
I had to go get ready for the hospital thing right after.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes. But it's beautiful. I'm excited for them. It's very, very nice. Good colors too. I'm all about the colors. So.
Chief picked him out, right, Chief?
I did not pick those. He said he doesn't remember picking them. I said, liar.
Hopefully you like them.
They are, they're nice.
Oh,
They're
good.
really nice.
Good.
Okay, I also, on a personal note, went to Don Hall, had a slideshow last Friday night at Preservation Hall. And it was about 2 hours long, and I have to tell you, it was wonderful. He
Of his
really, yes, he spent 4 weeks in Europe and he had slides. I had no idea that he was so enamored with museums and art. Oh, it's, and architecture and everything. He did a great job, and he had like 30 or 40 people there, something like
It's a
that.
big crowd, yeah.
Yes,
He
of his closest friends. No wonder he
Good.
took it to Preservation Hall.
Yeah, he started in Scotland, went to Ireland, then went to Berlin, and then to Amsterdam.
Wow.
It was very cool. It was very cool. And I can't say that about a lot of slideshows I've been to. Okay, upcoming holiday dinner dance on Saturday night. Hope to see everybody there, the Jimmy Buffett thing.
Jimmy
And,
Buffett won't be there.
no, he won't. And,
Got my ticket though. I got my ticket.
I'm bartending, so I'll be there.
Yeah, but that's no fair, you get it free.
I know. What a cheater. And Tuesday night, the C2C meeting, Call Your Interpretive and Information Center meeting, is going to be in Dunsmuir's Railroad Park restaurant car thing. I've never
Oh.
been there, so I'm really looking forward to it
It's
this time.
nice, it's really nice,
Mhm.
yeah.
Looking forward to it. And then the other thing about Greenhorn Park, and this is a little negative, but I did so well, don't you think?
Don't end on a negative note.
I know, you're never supposed to. The homeless shelter, I've been walking there for years and years, probably as long as I've been here, 24 years. But,
Which I got to be.
probably. But I do notice that when the cold weather starts, that the regular homeless people at the lower end. So there have been a few times when there's been some arguing and yelling and screaming, and it's uncomfortable. So if you take children there, which I have been there when moms have been walking through with carriages and kids in tow, and when the profanity starts and the yelling and stuff, just avoid the lower end, because they tend to congregate at Lower Greenhorn, and the Upper Greenhorn is a little more comfortable for families. And hopefully we can get a little more patrol there every once in a while, which would be really nice. But there's 4 regular people that go to the lower end and start a fire in the correct place and everything and use it. And then there's another table up that there's a regular gentleman that is at a couple of tables up away from him, and he's very nice. The group down at the lower end are the ones that are the problem. So if you go there, just stick at the upper side.
Okay,
Thank you.
but that's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Forgot something.
Forgot something?
There's a Masonic breakfast this Sunday
You
at
usually
Mason's
say
Hall.
that. Yes.
And this Sunday's charity is going to be Toys for Tots.
Oh,
All
excellent,
right on, good.
excellent,
Yeah,
And it's always a
amazing.
good meal.
yes.
It's always a good meal.
So it's this Sunday from when to when?
So from 8 to noon, but you want to get there, don't get there at noon, that's,
There's no food left.
well, yeah, it gets a little tight. You want to get there 8 to 11:30.
But it's a
Goes to-
really good cause, the Toys for Tots for children, for Toys for Children. That's a really awesome thing, so.
And they may even have Santa there, I'm not sure.
Ooh, Santa Claus. Might be there a little early. That's exciting. Okay, so it's been a really busy week. And I wanted to start out by saying that Norm actually invited me to go with him. Yreka Rotary every year, and Norm for the last 14 years has given out dictionaries to the 3rd graders at Evergreen Elementary School. And this year I went with Norm, and it was a great experience. So Norm purchased through the Yreka, through the Rotary Club, 120 dictionaries. And we went into how many? 3 or 4?
Classrooms.
4 classrooms of 3rd graders. And these kids were so excited to get a dictionary they could put their own name in and take home and share with their family. They were really excited about it. And Norm talked about some really cool stuff, like how he played games with dictionaries when he was a kid, about looking them up, challenging, someone what the meaning of a word is or how to spell it, which I thought was really cool. And I talked to them, well, we kind of took turns with the different classrooms. When I talked to them, I encouraged them to work with their dictionaries and do good in school, and then they could be mayor someday. And the kids loved that. They thought that was really cool. So that was a fun thing that we did the other day. Also, that same day, a little later that morning, I did the Read Across Siskiyou. Remember, they came and made a presentation here. And they gave me this giant book. It's called Quick as a Cricket or Quick as a Grasshopper. I can't remember. Anyway, and so I read it to all the preschoolers, many of the preschools in the area. There's a picture on the front page of tonight's paper with Sheriff Lopi in color. There's a picture on the second page of me in black and white. So you know who's more important. Anyway, but it was a great article. The new editor did a really nice job with it. And that was really fun too, because the kids were so good. They were so attentive and they loved the book and they asked good questions. And one of the animals in there was a shark, and one little boy knew exactly what kind of shark it was. He said, "That's a hammerhead shark." And one little girl said, "Why are the ants so big?" And because the idea was that you could be big, you could be small. I told him it was pretend. And anyway, it was just a wonderful experience. I mean, I tell you what, really want to do something fun, spend some time with the kids, get their enthusiasm and their energy and their thirst for knowledge. That was really fun. I loved it. We did have a water committee meeting this week, and I also attended, and Steve did too, the Siskiyou Economic Development Council had a quarterly meeting. It was down in McLeod, and they had excellent presenters. One of them was one of the owners of Denny Bar Company, the new restaurant over in Etna. It was really interesting to hear his background. This guy has traveled all over the world, but he's from Scott Valley, and he wanted to come back and do something good for his community, and it was really neat. And he says, "I'm not a public speaker." He was really nervous about speaking, and everyone was so surprised because he's such a successful businessman. So that was really cool. Then there was another guy, and I can't remember his business. It's a green business, groceries, Thrive Market. Wasn't that the name of it?
Yeah, that's
Thrive
right.
Market. So this guy came from out of town, bought land in Hornbrook, and is now, has this online business. But the really cool news is that he's bringing jobs back to our communities as well. So that was really cool. And there was a third speaker. I can't remember who the third one was.
The third speaker was the very first one, from the Office of Tourism.
Oh, right.
With the state.
It was the executive director of the Office of Tourism, and she came and she was very complimentary about what beautiful country we lived in, and promoting tourism in our area, and getting more people up here to support our businesses. So there were three really positive speakers. I thought it was a really nice meeting. The Brookdale Chamber Mixer was last Thursday night, a week ago tonight, and that was really nice, well attended. They did tours, and there were some of the residents there, which is really nice to talk to some of the older members of the community. That was nice. Planning on going to the Chamber Holiday Dinner Dance. Siskiyou Homelessness Coalition I attended today, and I'm planning to help with the PIT, Point in Time Count, in January, which anybody wants to help. We'd love to have more volunteers to help us with counting homeless in our area so we can get some of that funding. I spoke, I don't know how many of you have read the paper tonight, but there is an article in the paper, no more burn permits allowed at this time, which fits right into what you were talking about with our fire chief, Jerry Lemus, because it's way too dry, and so we had talked about that.
You're saying there's no burning?
There's no burning.
Not the burn permits are already out, but so it's not the no more burn permits, it's there's a burn ban back in place?
There's a burn ban.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's what you
Yeah,
said.
those
I didn't
can
say it
still
right.
issue
Thank
burn
you.
permits.
No, we can't.
No, we can, we just can't use them.
Yeah, right. No one can
They
use
want to
a
issue
burn
burn
permit.
permits.
There's a burn ban
There's
back
a-
in place.
The burn ban until it starts to rain again, until we have some more moisture. No more burning, so a burn ban, thank you. Then,
Nobody listens to you, Steve.
last but not least, he may have said it, but he and I have been talking
things.
about it all week.
Yeah.
Yes, because Don Hall let me know that we were still allowing burning, but the county didn't, and so I took it to City Hall and we got things done, so I'm pleased. So last but not least, I wanted to end on a nice positive note. So I could not go to Don's.
Unlike some.
I could not go to Don's presentation. I really wanted to, because I went to the Women in Business Network's annual meeting out at Bel Campo. And little did I know that I was being honored. And yes, and I got this really nice, certificate of appreciation. I don't know, some of you may know that I helped start the one in Yreka. There was a Women in Business Network in Mount Shasta. We brought it up to Yreka a number of years ago when I was on the chamber, when I was working at the chamber. And anyway, a really, really nice big bouquet of flowers and a nice certificate, and totally shocked me. I was not expecting it.
Good.
So every once in a while, it's nice to get a pat on the back. So that's all I have to
Awesome.
say, so,
Very nice.
so thank you. And I think if we don't have anything else, then I think we will adjourn to closed session. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.